In the first video of Learning Objective 5, we learned about what we call the fractional reserve banking system. So banks are only going to keep a fraction of your deposits on hand as cash in what we call reserves. So in our previous example, a particular bank had $1 million worth of deposits in the balances of their depositors' accounts, and the bank kept $150,000 of that $1 million on hand as reserves in cash. Now, if banks only keep a fraction of reserves on hand, where does the rest go? Well, the rest goes in the bank's objective of earning profits, which is I'm going to purchase assets. So what are assets in general? Is something that you own. Something of value that you own. And so the bank is going to try to buy valuable things. Now, the main asset that the bank purchases or engages in is loans. So they're going to make loans to consumers, households, to buy cars, to make large purchases, in particular to buy houses, so mortgages. Banks are going to issue and all sorts of various types of loans, personal loans, and all down the line. And so the goal of the bank then is to earn interest on these loans, and they're valuable, and they accrue profits for the bank as long as they make more on these loans than they do paying you as depositors. So loans are the main source where banks take their money. They make loans out to consumers and firms. And then the bank is also going to purchase other interest-bearing assets. Right, so you can think of this as normal. They don't typically tend to buy really stocks, so we'll maybe have a chance to learn about how banks manage risk. But since they have a responsibility to pay back your deposits, should you want them, the bank can't get too risky with their strategies. So banks can't engage in really risky asset purchases because those assets fluctuate in value. So if banks take all of your deposits and invest in the stock market, and the stock market goes way down, like it has recently, then the bank's balance sheet is going to take a big hit. And we'll learn about how that balance sheet works here in a few videos. So the main point here is that banks are going to purchase assets. And an example of an asset, the main one the bank has is loans. They're going to take the extra money that they have from your deposits minus their reserves, and they're going to loan that money out to consumers and firms and earn interest on those. So an important question to ask is, why does the bank serve this purpose? Right? So why can't I just go and find somebody else? If I want a loan for a car, $20,000, why can't I go out on my own and find somebody that's willing to loan me $20,000? So that way we don't have to mess around with the banks at all in this function. So in general, this credit market that we've developed is facilitated by what I call financial intermediaries, or what we call financial intermediaries. And a bank is an example of a financial intermediary. So what are these things? So a financial intermediary, and if you think hard about the words here, intermediary means I'm in between two groups, and that's exactly what these institutions do. So a financial intermediary arranges loans or credit between borrowers and lenders. And that's exactly what we need for the credit market to function. The credit market says we have people who demand credit, borrowers, people who supply credit, the lenders, and in order for them to meet each other and agree on loans, we need a financial intermediary such as a bank. Now, why? Why do we need one? So there's several reasons. One is what I call, or a lot of them are information problems. In particular, it's difficult to tell who is trustworthy or creditworthy. And in some sense, that could potentially go both ways. But for the most part, lenders are concerned about having a trustworthy borrower. So a lender wants to know that they're going to get paid back. So if I give you a loan for $20,000, I would like to have a good sense that you're actually going to pay me back with the agreed upon interest. Now, that can be difficult for individuals to determine, right? So we have different mechanisms such as credit scores and those types of things that help us understand or determine who is trustworthy. But as an individual, that's a lot of work for me every time I want my savings to go to a loan to earn some higher interest rate. It becomes difficult for me to always figure out who is trustworthy and who isn't. And so banks and financial intermediaries can solve that problem and take advantage of economies of scale. So banks make this easier to figure out who are the good borrowers and who are the less trustworthy borrowers. And the banks can then handle all of the other stuff that goes along with this, right? So you have all of what I call transaction costs that are reduced when banks take control of it. Loan agreements, what I call search costs, which is finding the lenders, finding the borrowers, right? So if you had to go out and find somebody that was going to loan you $20,000, it could take a while, right? What are you going to do? You're going to go door to door. You're going to post an ad on Facebook. That could take a long time to find somebody and find somebody that's serious about it. Banks and financial intermediaries centralize all of those transaction costs, and they have the process down smoothly, and so it makes it much easier for borrowers and lenders to come together and agree to terms to transact credit. And so those are the main purposes of financial intermediaries. Banks are an example of that, and we're now going to try to get a little bit deeper look into the activities of banks.